If you have a body, then you deserve well-being. I think it's absolutely necessary that we each focus on what we can do individually to heal our own trauma. When we have a lot of trauma in our bodies, it's very difficult for us to be present to the way that other people are experiencing emotions. It's very easy for us to slip into othering and treating people who look different from us or act different from us. Maybe they have a different cultural or religious background, a different gender, or something that we perceive as threatening. And when we have unprocessed trauma inside of our bodies, then that can really result in different forms of psychological violence that we do to ourselves, or it can even result in actual physical violence that we feel that we have to do in order to get someone that we perceive as threatening away from us. When we are othering another human being, we can't receive of them in their full humanity. We can't understand because we're so in our own trauma. This person has the same needs as I do. So we have all of these different fields of science, such as psychology, neuroscience, psychiatry, public health, even education, that all have their own unique lenses on what well-being is about. But a lot of these disciplines are very siloed from one another. They're not necessarily in conversation, and they each have their own intervention-based approaches for how it is that they can support the physiological and psychological and relational health and well-being of our societies. So I think once we get these fields of science in conversation with one another, then we can build some really important bridges of understanding so we can see how can we support one another? How can we actually contribute to a field of interdisciplinary research? We're only going to be able to do that if every single sector in our society, education, nonprofit, medicine, the political sector, all collectively agree that trauma exists and it is very important to heal. There's a way in which art can really provide a path forward to bringing healing to movements for social justice. A lot of people inside of the movement for social justice are deeply burnt out, and they have a lot of pain inside of their bodies. There's a lot of resistance. You know, for a long time, I was like, oh, I was afraid of bringing art into my research because of these questions like, oh, is art objective enough? Is this going to be acceptable inside of the scientific study of neuroscience? One of the things I think is amazing about what neuroscience is showing us about art is that, especially with figurative and abstract art, when we're viewing this art, there's something that happens inside of our brains where our brain does not necessarily know that that art is outside of us. The brain thinks that the art is happening in our bodies. And so it is producing a certain kind of feeling and emotion inside of ourselves that can actually begin to do things like reduce the stress hormone, cortisol, right? It can promote these moments of insight and imagination and creativity that are very spontaneous. And we also know that when we're looking at a beautiful work of art, our brain actually thinks it's involved in the making of that work of art. I think if we're going to be really innovative about asking ourselves questions, how are we going to bring healing into the movement for social justice, then art, and especially museum spaces, are probably the most powerful places that we have access to that can really promote this kind of conversation. So as far as I know, this is the first truly global event that is bringing together thought leaders across all different types of fields and really have deep and intimate conversations about why it is that we have to have this truly interdisciplinary approach. My biggest hope and excitement is that we feel something new, is that there are certain emotions that come alive inside of our bodies that inspire whole new frameworks for approaching the very important work that we do in the world. Whenever we get overwhelmed by how much complexity there is, or even by the violence that we see in society, it's the body's natural response to want to numb those feelings and emotions for just a little bit so we can have some space and some time to process. But when it becomes a problem is when numbness is our baseline. When numbness is all that we experience, then we're basically walking around without truly living, without having the capacity to really connect with other people, for some of us, opening up to greater feeling is scary. It does involve some discomfort, and it does, in certain cases, involve pain. Because when we are opening ourselves up to greater levels of emotion, then we become more sensitive to suffering around us. And I think that when we use, for instance, contemplative practices in combination with art, then we can create these incredibly healing spaces where we can slowly open up at our own pace in a way that is trauma-informed, and we'll see that there's like a whole new world of creative capacity inside of ourselves. And I'm just really hoping that the leaders of the world who are watching this event, who have an eye on this event, really see that we have all of the resources that we need in order to create a more deeply feeling and engaged society.